I used to believe I was a master of a secret language, the language of the stock market. It was a language of numbers, charts, and patterns, and I was fluent. To others, it was a casino, a place of wild chance and reckless gambling. To me, it was a complex, beautiful machine, and I was one of the few who understood how it worked. My pride wasn't in my wealth, but in my process. I was a student of risk management, a disciple of diversification. My portfolio was my masterpiece, a carefully constructed fortress designed to withstand any siege. That fortress was the foundation of my life, a life that was, by any measure, perfect. I had a great job in financial analysis, a career that gave me both a steady income and a deep understanding of the markets I so loved. I had a wife who was my partner in every sense of the word, a woman whose love was the bedrock of my world. We had two incredible children, a boy and a girl, whose laughter was the soundtrack to our beautiful life in a sprawling suburban home. I was a provider, a protector, and the architect of our family's unshakable security. The stock market was my second job, my passion. It was the engine that was propelling us toward true financial freedom. The passive income from my investments was already significant, a quiet, steady stream of dividends and capital gains that allowed us a life of comfort and privilege. My wife trusted my expertise implicitly. She would see me at my desk late at night, surrounded by charts and financial reports, and she would see not a gambler but a guardian, a vigilant watchman on the walls of our fortress. "Don't work too hard," she'd say, her hand on my shoulder. "I'm not working," I'd reply with a confident smile. "I'm building." I truly believed it. I believed I was building a future that was immune to the shocks and misfortunes of the world. I had hedged my bets, I had diversified across sectors, I had created a financial ecosystem so robust, so intelligently designed that I felt a serene, almost godlike sense of control. My biggest mistake wasn't in the stocks I chose. It was in my belief that I could control the ocean, that I was the master of the tides. I had forgotten the most fundamental rule of the market and of life. The ocean is always, always bigger than the boat. The storm didn't arrive with a thunderclap. It began as a distant, dark cloud on the horizon, a series of concerning economic indicators from overseas, a flicker of instability in the tech sector. The amateurs, the emotional investors, they started to panic. I saw it as an opportunity. This, I told myself, is what separates the men from the boys. This is a healthy correction, a chance to buy good companies at a discount. My risk management models were all green. My hedges were in place. I felt a surge of intellectual pride, a quiet arrogance as I watched others sell in fear while I calmly bought the dip. I was the stoic captain holding the course while the rest of the fleet scattered in the wind. But the storm didn't pass. The cloud grew, swallowing the entire sky. The healthy correction deepened into a full-blown market rout. It wasn't a rational downturn. It was a contagion of fear, a black swan event that defied all the historical models I had so carefully studied. My diversification, the cornerstone of my strategy, proved to be a useless fiction. It didn't matter if you were in tech or industrials or consumer goods, everything was falling in unison. It was like having a dozen different lifeboats, only to discover they were all tied to the same sinking ship. I watched my life savings, the digital representation of 2 decades of work and discipline, begin to hemorrhage. The numbers on my screen, the ones that used to sing to me, were now screaming, a torrent of crimson red that signified a catastrophic systemic failure. The feeling was a cold, sickening dread, the feeling of a pilot who realizes that the controls are no longer responding. The fortress I had built was being overrun, and the walls I thought were made of stone were turning out to be made of sand. The storm that was raging in the market soon crashed into the shores of my real life. The economic crisis that was gutting my portfolio was the same one that was forcing my company to make difficult decisions. The phrase, corporate restructuring, started to echo in the hallways at work. My steady, reliable job, the bedrock of my family's budget, was suddenly standing on shifting ground. The tension at home became a thick, unbreathable fog. My wife, who had always seen me as the unshakable pillar of our security, now saw a man I didn't recognize in the mirror, a man whose face was a mask of strained denial, a man who was constantly, obsessively glued to his phone, watching our future dissolve in real time. Should we sell? She asked one night, her voice trembling with a fear she was trying to hide. Just stop the bleeding? No, I said, my voice harsher than I intended. Selling now would be locking in the losses. You have to trust the system. You have to trust me. But as I said the words, I realized with a chilling certainty that I no longer trusted either. The captain was still pretending to hold the course, but in his heart, he knew the ship was already lost. The end was a rapid, brutal sequence of failures. The first was a margin call. In my arrogance, I had been using a small amount of leverage to amplify my returns. It was a calculated risk that had paid off handsomely in the bull market. In the crash, it was a self-destruct mechanism. The email from my broker was polite, professional, and utterly merciless. I had 24 hours to deposit a sum of money I no longer had, or they would begin liquidating my positions to cover the debt. It was a fire sale at the bottom of the market, a final brutal blow that vaporized the last of our meaningful capital. Then came the meeting with my boss. It was a short, clinical conversation, filled with corporate euphemisms and scripted apologies. My division was being downsized. My position was being eliminated. I was given a severance package that felt like a cruel joke, a handful of life preservers thrown to a man who was already 1,000 feet underwater. I walked out of that building, my career, my identity as a successful professional, packed into a single cardboard box. I was a 45-year-old man with a specialized skill set in a world that was no longer hiring. I drove home in a daze, the carefully drawn map of my life now a smoldering pile of ash. The final pillar of our security had crumbled. That night I had to tell my wife that not only was our fortune gone, but my job, our primary source of income, was gone too. The conversation was the quietest, most devastating one of our lives. There was no shouting, no screaming, just a vast, cold silence as the full weight of our new reality settled upon us. She looked at me, her eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound, heartbreaking emptiness. She was looking at a stranger, a man who had promised her a life of security and had delivered absolute and total ruin. "I can't do this," she said a few days later, her voice a fragile whisper. She was standing in our bedroom, a room that now felt like a borrowed space, a movie set for a life we were no longer living. "I can't live like this in this state of constant, terrifying uncertainty. The kids, they need a childhood, they need to feel safe, and I don't know how to make them feel safe with you anymore." It was a statement of fact, not an accusation. It was the sad, logical conclusion of my failure. I was the source of the storm. She was just a mother trying to get her children to higher ground. She took them to her parents' house. It was a temporary move, she said, just until we could figure things out. But we both knew. We were at a point where there was nothing left to figure out. I stood on the porch of our beautiful, soon-to-be-foreclosed house and watched her drive away. I was no longer a husband, a father, a provider, an investor. I was a man who had lost everything. The stock market hadn't just taken my money. It had taken my life's meaning. The fortress was a ruin, the kingdom was a wasteland, and I was a king of nothing, standing alone in the wreckage. In the desolate quiet of the aftermath, you learn that rebuilding a life is not like building a portfolio. There is no formula, no historical data to guide you. It is a slow, messy, and deeply personal act of salvage. The first phase was a grim, mechanical process of dismantling. I sold the house before the bank could take it, walking away with a pittance after the debts were cleared. I sold the cars. I moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, a place where the ghosts of my old life couldn't find me. It was a life stripped bare, a forced minimalism that was both terrifying and, in a strange way, clarifying. My identity had been so tightly wound around my assets, my job, my role as the provider. With all of that gone, I was a blank slate. I had to answer a question that I hadn't asked myself in 20 years. Who am I without all of this? The search for that answer began with the search for a job. It was a humbling journey. My impressive resume was now a liability, a reminder of a world I no longer belonged to. I ended up taking a job that had nothing to do with finance. I became a clerk at a local hardware store. The pay was a fraction of what I used to make in a single day of good market trading, but it was a paycheck. It was honest work. The job was a kind of therapy. I learned about plumbing fittings and different grades of sandpaper. I talked to ordinary people about their ordinary problems. I was no longer a high-flying analyst dealing in abstract millions. I was a man helping a neighbor fix a leaky faucet. There was a simple, grounding reality to the work that was a powerful antidote to the years I had spent in the ethereal world of digital wealth. My life found a new, simpler rhythm. I worked my shifts at the store. I lived on a strict budget. I took the bus. The constant, low-level hum of anxiety that had been the soundtrack to my life as an investor was replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a day's work done, of bills paid with money I had earned with my own two hands. My relationship with my children was rebuilt, slowly and carefully, through the sterile interface of a video call. I couldn't be the father who provided a life of luxury anymore, so I became the father who listened. I became the father who was present, who was interested, who was just there. The distance was a painful chasm, but in that space, we forged a new kind of connection, one that wasn't buffered by the privileges and distractions of wealth. My ex-wife and I found a quiet, respectful peace. The pain of the collapse was still there, a scar we would both carry forever, but we were united in our love for our children. We became partners in their well-being, a different kind of portfolio that we managed together. I started to find value in things that couldn't be charted or quantified. The satisfaction of helping a customer find the right tool, the beauty of a sunset scene from my apartment window, the simple pleasure of a quiet evening with a good book. I learned that my fortress had been an illusion. The only real security in this life is not in your bank account, but in your own resilience. It's in the strength of your character, in your ability to find meaning and purpose when the world has taken everything from you. I am not the man I was. I am less successful, less wealthy, less in control. But I am also more present, more humble, and in a strange way, more free. I lost everything in the stock market, but in the ruins, I was forced to find myself. And the man I found, a quiet, hardworking hardware store clerk who takes the bus to work, is a man I think I can learn to live with. He is building a new life, not with stocks and bonds, but with the simple, durable materials of honesty, resilience, and a quiet, hard-won peace. I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Comment down below along with your country. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, share with friends, and subscribe for more content like this.